A decade ago, I moved to Florence, and I could barely order a coffee in Italian. A year later, I was having full conversations in Italian, arguing about politics in Italian, flirting in Italian, sometimes even teaching in Italian if I needed to. And here's the thing, everything I tell my students now comes from the mistakes I made that year. So today I want to share with you 5 mistakes I made when learning Italian. And I promise you, you're probably doing about 3 of them with your English right now. By the end of this video, I will tell you what I do differently as a teacher because of what I learned that year. A bit of context, about a decade ago, I got a job teaching English in Florence, but my Italian was basically non-existent. And I remember arriving, my first home was in a little flat near the Bargello Museum, and I was walking to catch the bus to work. I looked to my right, saw the Duomo and thought, could I be any luckier? And then I walked into the school where I would be teaching, slightly late, a bit flustered, and the man who is now my husband was sitting there on the sofa waiting. But that is a story for another day. The point is, I had to learn Italian, and I wanted to learn it fast. Not because anyone made me, but because I wanted that life. I wanted to be able to gossip with the person I was ordering coffee from in the morning. I wanted to join in with my Italian colleagues laughing at work. I wanted to stop being the foreigner standing there nodding and smiling and not understanding a word. There was a very embarrassing story when just that happened. My Italian was very low and basic at that point, and an elderly gentleman from Florence was chatting to me and my colleague, and he was saying, "Oh, sorry, I should probably let you go because I'm probably really boring you. I'm making you bored." And I didn't understand, but was just being polite, nodding, going, sì, sì. I wanted to avoid those situations. And over that year, I made every single mistake a language learner can make. So let me take you through them. Mistake 1, I translated everything in my head. Someone would ask me a question in Italian, and my brain would say, okay, what's that in English? Now, what do I want to reply in English? And then I would translate it back to Italian. What's the word for that? Oh, and what's the verb, ending, which tense? And by the time I worked it out, often the conversation had moved on, or the other person was waiting there with that slightly impatient but polite face thinking, I've lost her. She doesn't understand anything that I'm saying. I see this constantly with my English students. They translate everything they hear in English into their native language, and then they translate it back. It's why you feel slow. It's not because your English is bad, it's because you're doing twice the work. If you just think in English, you receive it in English, and you reply in English, you're halving your workload. So what changed it for me, and I remember the exact moment, was when I started forcing myself to think in Italian, even when I was alone, and I would narrate to myself. So I'd be walking through the streets and I'd think, oh, una macchina rossa, a red car, un uomo con un cane, a man with a dog. Forse posso prendere qualcosa da bere. Maybe I can get something to drink. Sometimes stupid little sentences, and I didn't always know the vocabulary, but if you start doing that, narrating to yourself in the target language, you start building a brain that operates in that language rather than just translating the whole time. I have done a video which gives you a number of strategies to help with this, how you can shift from translating in your head to thinking in English. So make sure you have a look. But now the takeaway is this. Stop translating, start narrating, even if it's nonsense, especially if it's nonsense. The more nonsense, the better. You just need to start training your brain to think in the language. Mistake 2, I waited until I was ready to speak. Again, this is one of the most common mistakes I see learners making. You are waiting for your English to be good enough before you speak. And I'm going to tell you something really uncomfortable. It will never be good enough. That's not meant to be a depressing thought. That is meant to be a liberating thought. It's meant to free you. Because what I learned in Florence is that fluency doesn't come before speaking. Fluency comes from speaking. They are not separate stages. They're the same thing. The fluency can't come unless you speak. For my first few months in Italy, I barely spoke a word. I understood lots. I read a lot in Italian. I was listening to lots of Italian. I studied verb tables. We'll come back to that in a moment. But I wouldn't open my mouth. I was too afraid. I was too embarrassed. I didn't want to sound stupid. I didn't want to make mistakes. And so my Italian was getting nowhere. And it just happened one night. And of course, I had had a few glasses of wine. I don't recommend you do this, but actually, when your inhibitions are lower, that is when you tend to speak more naturally. It just came out. I started speaking and I suddenly realized it didn't matter if I made mistakes. Of course I was going to make mistakes. It wasn't my language. I was just starting to learn. So I was out with a group of Italian friends and I just started to speak. And of course they teased me sometimes, particularly if I have any Italian viewers, how I pronounced this word, because in English we don't have the double consonant distinction anyway. So I was teased. But actually, I had realized something very important, and that was it didn't matter if my Italian wasn't perfect. It was never going to be perfect. And that was okay. I wouldn't improve unless I spoke. I needed to make peace with the fact I would make mistakes. And so, my lovely learner, if you are watching this thinking, I'll speak English when I get a bit better, I say this with love, you are wrong. You get better by speaking, not the other way around. Okay, we're halfway through, 3 mistakes left, and this next one is one I see absolutely everywhere with my students. I forgot to mention there is a free PDF to go along with this lesson that lists the 5 biggest mistakes when language learning. It's linked below. You just need to put in your email and you will receive it. That said, onward. Mistake 3, and honestly, this is the one I just want to shout from the rooftops. I used grammar study as a way to feel productive without actually using the language. So I would study the grammar and think that that was a productive use of my time. You know what I mean. You sit down, you open your book, you make beautiful, color-coded notes about all the different verb endings and how to form certain tenses, how to form the conditionals. You feel like a top student. You close the book. And then someone would ask me a question in Italian, and I would stand there like a deer in headlights. It's a good English expression, a deer in headlights. I'd stand there startled, not knowing how to respond. And all of that grammar that I had sat down to painstakingly take notes with, it would just go. It would not be there in my head when I needed it. Because the thing about grammar is that grammar itself is not the language. Grammar is the scaffolding behind the language. You need some of it. I'm a teacher. Of course, I think you need grammar. Grammar is important, but you cannot speak grammar. You can only speak the language. You need the grammar as a scaffold, but grammar does not replace the speaking part. And what's the difference? Grammar is when you just learn the rule, but language is when you hear a sentence with that rule 10 times in different situations, and then it just falls into your mouth one day without you having to think about it. Language is when that grammar gets automatically used without having to rely on those verb tables that you wrote out. That only happens through input and use. Listening, reading, speaking, writing, not verb tables, not highlighters. My rule for myself now, and the rule I give to students, for every 1 hour of studying grammar, there should be 3 hours of actually using the language. If your ratio is currently the other way around, you study 3 hours of grammar and then you only use it for an hour, you're learning about the language, you are not learning the language. Mistake 4, I compared myself to native speakers, which sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but I promise you, you are doing it. I was doing it. Every time I heard Italian friends chatting in the kitchen at speed, throwing slang at one another, laughing at one another, finishing each other's sentences, I would sit there feeling like a complete fraud. I would think to myself, I will never sound like this. I am not a real Italian speaker. But here's what I actually want you to hear. Native speakers have been hearing their language since before they were born. Yes, before they were born. When they were in utero, they were hearing the language out of the womb. Your job is not to sound like a native speaker. Your job is to communicate effectively, to connect, to say what you mean and understand when people are speaking back to you. That is what true fluency actually is. It's not perfection. It's not native level performance. It's a working relationship with a language. I work with English learners every week, and frankly, they are brilliant. Their English is wonderful, but they'll apologize to me about their English. They'll say, oh, sorry, my English is bad. And it's not. It's really, really not. They are comparing themselves to a standard that does not exist. Some imaginary, perfect native speaker who, by the way, make a ton of mistakes. Watch this video to see how many. Stop comparing. Stop comparing yourself to a native speaker and start measuring yourself against yourself. Think about your English 6 months ago, a year ago, because that is the fair fight. Comparing yourself to a native speaker is not a fair fight. Last one, mistake 5. I thought a perfect Italian accent was the goal. When I moved to Italy, I couldn't roll my R's. I had a friend try to teach me, and I was trying so hard to roll my R's to sound less English, as Italian as possible. And what I realized eventually is that an Italian accent wasn't even what Italians wanted from me. They were just thrilled that I was even trying to speak their language. They found it endearing. They'd call me the English girl. My accent was part of who I was. It told the story of my journey to their language. Trying to erase or flatten it was like trying to delete a part of my identity. It's who I am. And again, that's something to be embraced. I do put some effort into the accent, but the goal is not to actually sound like an Italian. And the same is true of you. Your English accent is not a problem. It tells us where you're from. It carries your identity. And as long as I can understand you, and more often than not, I can understand you, your accent is doing the job perfectly. As I've said, if your accent is so strong that it is difficult to make yourself understood, that's another story. But the goal of learning English isn't to sound British or American or Australian or Scottish or whatever accent. The goal is to make yourself understood. That's it. Anyone telling you otherwise is setting you up for failure, because it is practically impossible to have a native accent if you haven't grown up around the language. Embrace your accent. It's part of your English learning journey, and it's wonderful. This is why I teach the way I do. I don't want to teach you grammatically perfect English from a textbook. I want to teach you the sort of English you will encounter in real life. Everyday English. That's what my whole channel is centered around. I never tell you that your English needs to be better before you can do something. I tell you to use what you have already today, and the rest will build itself. Because everything I just told you, those 5 mistakes, I made them all. And the reason I can teach you is not because I'm some perfect native speaker who descended from a cloud holding a grammar book. It's because I sat in that classroom in Florence, and in that kitchen surrounded by Italian friends, or on the bus in Tuscany, not understanding a word. And I felt exactly what you feel now. That's why I do this, and that's why I want you to keep going. Tell me in the comments, which of those 5 mistakes are you currently making? Please tell me. I find it fascinating and I read every single one. Also, if you have learned a language as an adult, what has been the most challenging aspect of that? Again, I would love to know. Don't forget, there is a free resource that outlines the content of today's lesson, as well as other free resources that might be useful for you. They are linked below. They are completely free. You just need to download them. And if you would like to work with me more directly, my online lessons and courses are linked below as well. I'd love if you subscribed if you haven't already. This channel is for learners who want to learn warm, useful, real English, not textbook English. And with that said, I will see you hopefully in the next one. Bye.